Okay, so let's get started. Welcome again. Thank you everybody for joining us, sticking with us as we continue to have these virtual offerings. It's just so great that you're still joining us for all sorts of things at the NCMA. So my name is Brianne Senor, I go by Bree, and I am the manager of park programs, among other things, at the NCMA. And just a few little housekeeping things for Zoom to make sure that y'all have the best experience you can. Make sure that your view is how you want it for the webinar. So Diane, our guide or docent tonight, will be sharing her screen the whole time. So you want to make sure that is your main view. You can see the slides. And there's also at the bottom of your screen, there should be, if you're on a PC, some menu options. So if you need closed captioning, I'll also share that in the chat, but you can use closed captioning, auto-generated by Zoom if you need that. And what else? The chat function is down there and the Q&A function is also there. So what we'll ask is, like, please use the chat throughout. If you kind of have comments or want to chat to each other and kind of have, maybe a few little side conversations going if that comes up. But if you have a specific question that you want us to address or Diane to answer, we'll get to those stopping points throughout the webinar. So if you have a really clear question, use the Q&A function, because otherwise it'll probably get lost in the chat. I will keep an eye on both, and you can upvote questions. If there's a question that like everyone really wants answered, please do that so we can prioritize. And like I said, we will get to those. There'll be stopping points specifically for questions. And what else? Oh, when you are chatting, I think everyone's doing this, but the way the Zoom webinars, I just like to remind people, in the two kind of menu drop down box in the chat, you have to choose to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it will just go to the panelists. And if you want everyone to see your chat, just make sure it's going to everybody. And lastly, there will be a recording of this that we're making right now, and that will be available starting on Friday on our YouTube channel. So you can share it with people, come back and watch it, whatever works. So without further ado, I'm turning it over to Diane Beckman. Diane is one of our all-star docents at the museum. She's great. We all work with her. We all admire her expertise and enthusiasm for Monet and the museum. She's been a docent with us since 2014, and she is a professor emerita at NC State in world literature and French language. She was a faculty director for the summer study abroad program, and took I can't remember how many, over a dozen, I think, trips with students to France over the summer. And she has been to France more than 20 times. So she's bringing a lot of wonderful stories and experiences here to share tonight. So thank you, Diane. I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, well, as everyone can see, the topic tonight is visiting Étretat, a virtual trip with Monet. And this is where I see how we're going to advance. So this is the journey we'll be going on tonight. It says part one, who are we talking about? Claude Monet. What are we going to talk about? His paintings and pastels. Where are we going? To Étretat in Normandy, France. Why? To celebrate my favorite painting at the museum, Monet's The Cliffs at Sunset. And the time period we'll be focused on tonight is 1864 to 1886. And then part two of our journey tonight will be my personal trips with my family and with students to Etretat, and the three different walks that you can take. I'm going to see if my slides will advance. Yes, they will. As you know, I hope you know, we have 3 Monets that belong to the NCMA, and this is the one that we're focused on mostly tonight, the Cliff Etretat Sunset. And we don't really know exactly when he painted, well, we do know when he painted it, but the dating is very controversial because he didn't write the dates on the back. He did sign 83, so we're going to believe that it's 83. And you can see there's numbers that are going to tell you the size, and this is a pretty typical size for Monet to use because he made these paintings to sell. He was in a time period in the 80s where he was very concerned about making money. And so he would make these smaller canvases because people could buy them and take them home. So as I said, we own this at the NCMA, and those numbers 6724-1 means we acquired it in 1967. It was the 24th gift and the first in the 24th donation. And if you have any questions, be sure to let Bree know, because I can only see the slides. I can't see any questions. Then in 1975, we acquired this wonderful The Scène at Giverny Morning Miss. And as you see, it's much later. This is in 1897. He owns his property at Giverny. He's building all kinds of gardens and planting all kinds of plants. And so again, about the same size. And this is the only one that you can now see on display in the West Building. So go see it. And then we also own, this is the most recent, we acquired it in 2016, Waves at the Mannaporte. And this is from his second, what we're going to talk about, his second campaign in Etretat, his second long-term stay at Etretat, making paintings to sell. But this one in particular, he did not intend to sell, and we'll talk about that later. So my next question to you is, where are we? We're in France. And we're going to be focused on this yellow area, which is called Normandy. And Bree, if you will launch the first poll. So clearly we have a very well-traveled audience here tonight. And so 94% of the audience has been to France. And I'm sure that the remaining 6%, I hope that you'll want to go after seeing all the images I'm going to show you tonight. So as I said, we're going to be in Normandy. And here I go. This is a more up-to-date image with more details. So as you see, we've got, if you look at the airplane that's in the middle, there's 3 airplanes up on top, and the airplane is pointing directly at Étretat. We're in Upper Normandy. And right below the airplane to the left is Le Havre, which is French for the harbor, and that's where Monet grew up. So you can see he grew up just 15, 16 miles south of Étretat. You'll also notice that the French do not call it the English Channel, they call it the Sleeve. So that's the bay of water that you're going to see above Étretat, and we'll see it in the photos as well. So this is what I want you to kind of sink in and take a look at. I found a beautiful definition of what we're looking at here, so I'm going to read it to you. This is from the exhibition catalog for Monet at Étretat, an exhibition that's currently in Seattle, Washington. And the curator wrote, "The town faces a curving bay framed by 2 great rock formations that rise up on either end of a long beach." And so the beach is what's called La Plage. You can find that on the photo. To the northeast, so that's the furthest of the cliffs away from us, we have the Porte d'Amont, a wall reaching into the sea and pierced by an opening in the rock, and to the southwest, the much taller Porte d'Aval. And that one is not labeled in this image, but you can spot it because it's right next to the needle, the l'aiguille in French, the detached spire that rises over 170 feet from the water. Visitors can enjoy gazing at these formations from sea level on the beach, or climb up paths, and that's what we'll be talking about tonight, to the tops of the cliffs for spectacular views. Continuing along the path southwest of the Porte d'Aval, one comes to the 3rd Etretat cliff, the Mannaporte. This massive hulking arch would inspire some of Monet's most powerful views of the site. As fixed as these cliffs are, their appearance is endlessly varying according to the time of day, season, weather conditions, low or high tide, and location of the viewer. And so that's what permits us to have this slideshow tonight. wanted to tell you a little bit about Monet. And this is from a wonderful book called The Biographic Monet. I didn't become an impressionist as long as I can remember. I have always been one. And just to give you a little bit of his life story, if you follow the River Seine all the way down to the bottom of the page, you see Paris. Paris is where he was born in 1840. And as many of you know, and I hope some of you have visited, if we travel up the river to number 5, that is where we're going to leave him in Giverny. And you'll see he first started living there in 1883. So in the middle of this story I'm telling you tonight about Etretat. You continue up the Seine all the way to the sleeve or the English Channel. You'll see that inset map of France. And to the left on the edge of the continent, that's where Le Havre, where he grew up. And then really just where the blue of the map around the whole image of France is where you will also find Étretat. And then this page is showing all the places he lived in between. Talk just briefly about his method, what makes him such a revolutionary and important painter. So he, as the book says, he worked in oil on canvas, although we'll see some of his pastels tonight. He's known for using thick, like Vincent van Gogh, very famous for his thick paint put on. Instead of the symmetrical, classical style, he used a very modern composition that's down at the bottom of the page. So he was inspired by Japanese art and just really his own taste. And we'll also see examples of how just his canvases look different. They're so much more light colored than what was going on in France before the Impressionist Revolution. A lot of scientific inventions, as they give an example here of the kind of paintbrush he could use, but really beyond that, the invention of the paint tube in the 1840s completely changed the painting style. People could now paint out of doors, and that is what Monet is very famous for. What he did for color, it's worth its own little webinar. So I'm just going to point out here. So instead of blending colors on his palette, he would like you to blend them with your eye by juxtaposing colors right next to each other. He grew up, as I said, in Le Havre and became famous as a teenager for drawing caricatures of everyone he saw, starting, of course, with his teachers, and then making a lot of pocket money in his teens by drawing commissioned portraits. And he decided he wanted to become an artist, much to the despair of his father, who ran a chandlery or ship, kind of a supplies for ships, building in the harbor town of Le Havre, the harbor. And then his life changed when he finally decided to take the advice. He was Monsieur Boudin, who's a famous painter of the time period, saw his work in the windows of the stores in downtown Le Havre and approached him and said, you need to learn how to draw well. And I'm just reading here from the book again, appreciate the sea, the light, and the blue sky. I took his advice. And so we see that he started painting out of doors, and what site do they choose to illustrate this transformation? It's Etretat. So we do own a painting by Boudin, very important landscape. Marine is the French word for seascape, and he's very famous for those. And this is in our collection as well. But you can see this style, both he and Monet, very, very interested in the harbor and in boats. And then I want to tell about some of the important people in his life. You can see the contrast between his early style when he's trying to fit in. This portrait of his wife, Camille, on the left, the woman in the green dress. She was his model and later will become his wife. And then only 4 years later, this was a painting we had at the Monet in Normandy exhibit. And this is Camille at the beach in Trouville, which is a more upscale town on the Alabaster Coast. That's the name of the coast in Normandy, where we can find Etretat as well. And this is something he painted during their honeymoon. We'll talk about the painter Gustave Courbet in a minute. He was one of the witnesses at their marriage, but they had already had a son. And so they were accompanied on their honeymoon by their son. And here's their son. This painting actually came to the NCMA with the Sarah Lee collection. I don't know, Brie, if you were working there, volunteer there then, but I just fell in love with this painting. So this is his son, John, at 5 years old. Then 1879, we're getting close to the time that he painted his 2 major campaigns at Étretat. She dies, and he kind of shocked himself by painting a picture of her on his deathbed, on her deathbed. She died of cancer. But meanwhile, we see on the right a painting by Carolis Durand, who is also a painter. We have paintings by him at the NCMA. And this is a painting of Alice Hochedet, who becomes his second wife. And in fact, they lived together while he was still married to Camille, and Alice was still married to one of the first major collectors of Monet's work. So they started having this shared household around 1876, and they only got married in 1892 after Alice's husband died. And he went bankrupt, and there's all kinds of financial issues that are behind his Monet's desire to make some money at his painting. So why Etretat? Well, I think all I need to do is show you this photo and you can imagine why it's so important and why people want to go there. Back in the days of Louis XIV, they thought about making it a port, a defensible port, but that never happened. Marie Antoinette will have a chance to look at her oyster beds. She decided that they could raise oysters for her that were brought to Paris for the Queen. And I need to talk about trains. So I hope that you're familiar with this series of paintings that Monet did of the Gare Saint-Lazare in Paris. And in particular, this is the train that would have taken him to Normandy. And this is also a transition painting, as we see from the kind of liner notes from the Art Institute, saying this is really one of the last series. That was one of the first of the series paintings that he did. That is to say, painting the same, what they call motif or subject matter, over and over again and under different atmospheric conditions, different times of days. But this really marks the end of his urban period. He wanted to get along. He wanted to paint when everybody else was painting. But then he decided, really, I'm the poet. Well, he didn't decide this, but he was called the poet of nature. He decided he liked landscape and nature much more. So let's take a look at what's going on here. This is a poster showing how the railway line transformed France. So you can see between 1842 and 1860, how much the train network expanded. And in particular, here's an advertisement saying, come to Étretat. It's only 4 hours from Paris. You can get there on the train directly. And you can see all the things that make Étretat famous, the cliff, the same one that he paints, the fancy people taking little walks, people going out into the water, all the things that we'll see. And there's even somebody rolling up, it looks like a canvas down there too. So everything is included. Here are just some examples of travel postcards. You can go golfing. Of course, you're going to see the Needle and the Porte d'Aval. And you can also, even today, visit the great gardens of Etretat and get a great view at the same time. And Brie, do we have any burning questions before I plunge on?
I don't think so. I think I answered the one
Okay,
from
awesome.
Linda. Yeah, she was just making sure that we do not own the portrait of the sun that you shared.
No, but it was visiting. It was in the Sarah Lee collection, and they gave it. I could look up and find out where it is. But no, it was only at the NCMA during the time of that exhibit. The gifts went around.
That's it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to focus first on the time that Monet spent in Étretat in the 1860s, and this is while Camille is still alive, and he visits with Camille and his son Jean. So this is a drawing that was only recently discovered because it was on the back of another drawing, and it was matted, and just recently it was taken apart and studied. And it's just called Boats on the Beach in Normandy, but we can recognize the cliff. And so that kind of gives it away that, oh no, we're in Étretat. And I tried only to select artworks that had Étretat somewhere in the title, but this one, again, I couldn't resist. So he's sketching. This is the earliest painting that I found of Étretat. and we can recognize once again the porte d'aval. We can't see the needle, or you can kind of see it poking out, but it's not showing. And clearly we're at low tide here because we can see all these rocks ahead of us. And then this is going to be a more typical painting. So heavy sea at Etretat. And this is one you can count how many people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is one of his busiest pictures of people. We'll see the people kind of disappear as he gets more and more caught up in nature. And then this is an interesting painting, and you wouldn't know it was this. Again, the title doesn't give anything away. It's called The Luncheon, but it was in fact painted in Étretat. And I'm going to read you this quote from the Städel Museum in Frankfurt. Art history would have probably taken a different course if the jury of the Paris Salon had not turned down this painting by Monet in 1870. This rejection was followed 4 years later by the first exhibition of the Impressionists, where Monet presented the work. It shows his family, a guest, and their maidservant during luncheon on their stay near Étretat. It's a private scene from everyday life, but the nearly monumental format chosen by the artist raises its status to that of history painting. So you see it's 10 feet by 4 feet. It's much, much bigger than most of the paintings that we will see by Monet, and that's what caused a scandal. You did not paint your family that size, right? That was just not done. And this is one of my favorite paintings. Again, we don't own it. It's from the Orsay in Paris. And I was surprised to learn that it was also at Etretat. It was painted in Etretat. And you'll notice this is a very important element. He only visits Etretat in the fall and winter. He doesn't go during tourist season. And this painting was also rejected because, and I love this, it's more about perception than description. So for us, it's a nature scene, but for the people of the time, it wasn't realistic enough. It was shocking. And so it was rejected by the 1869 Salon. And now we see Etretat in full color. So this is a very unusual view, and it's going to take him many years to get back to doing this sort of peekaboo. We see the needle straight ahead. And in case you haven't caught on yet, the needle, which looks like it's attached to the porte d'aval, in our painting is in fact separated, and we'll have many opportunities to see that later. And then this is going to be typical of what he's interested in painting, the boats. As I said, his father worked in a boat supply store, and he was fascinated by boats. And we have two kinds here. On the left, we have what's called a caloge, which is a very unusual French word. And basically, it's a boat that can no longer sail. So it gets covered with thatch and can become used for storage, or people can actually live there. And it's a very Etretat kind of thing. You can see them. You can see them today. They're still, now they're kind of used as museums. And now I want to talk about who else is painting at Etretat in this time period. And the most important, I mentioned him to you, is Gustave Courbet, The Rocks of Etretat. And we're going to see a few of his paintings, again, very typical subject matter that we're going to see in connection with Monet: the rocks, the water, the sky, the boats. It's another view very much like our own, even getting closer. And you can start to see on the left that the limestone cliffs are soft enough for people to dig out holes, and some people will actually live in there or use them for storage. And then this is the most famous, the cliff at Etretat after a storm, because as you've probably noticed, it can storm a lot. The waves get very big. And so here again, you can imagine somebody is using this area for storage. Another famous realist painter of the same time period, Corot, going to paint the opposite view, looking in the other direction. And we'll have many more chances to see this, but you can see here, you see more people going about their daily lives. And then this one I found in a collection. Again, it's got Etretat in the title. And George Inness is another painter, American painter, who we have one of his works in our collection under the greenwood. But what I like about this painting in particular, it shows you a completely different perspective, what it looks like on top, and that it's a very rural area with a lot of animals. And still today, you walk up to the top of the hill and you're going to see the cows. And so now we're going to pause for a question if there is one, and we're going to do our next poll. So Bree, in whatever order you choose.
There I am. Okay. So yes, we have some questions. We can do those first. Let's see. Linda again says she has a tabloid, I guess a gossipy question. Were Camille and Alice okay with sharing Monet at the same time, or did the romance with Alice begin only after Camille's death?
Well, it's a little mysterious, but Alice did care for Camille through her her suffering and her death from cancer. So she really had a very supportive position. Alice had 6 children, Monet had 2, and so she was really in charge. She took over running the household. So it's a little, we don't have the details about when Alice and Monet started sleeping together. There are rumors that one of her sons was actually Monet's, but we can't do the DNA testing. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to I'll tell you all I know, but that's it.
Great. And then Max is asking
Max,
where are the
my son, Max.
Oh, that's
Is that Max? Is that my Max?
Oh yeah, same last name. Didn't pick up on that. Yay, thanks for coming. So he's wondering, where are the 2 Monet paintings that are not currently on display? Are they on loan or in conservation?
Well, so one is in the, I always get the East Building in the Reflections on Light. So the sunset painting is now in a special exhibition. It's at the NCMA on exhibition. And then the Mannaporte, Waves at Mannaporte, is in Seattle. So Max, as you know, we're going to Seattle to see the painting.
Great.
So all 3 are on view, just in different places.
Yeah, thank you. Someone else is asking, did Monet do a lot of pastels?
We're going to see some pastels when we get to 85. And I explain why we still have them. So yes, he did a lot of pastels, but many of them are lost and many of them are in private collections. You can't really, again, it's a special museum question. It's very difficult to display pastels because they're very light sensitive. And so the NCMA does not collect works on paper much, and certainly doesn't display them. So that's one of the reasons you probably have never seen a pastel by Monet, but you'll see some tonight.
Cool. Do you have time for 3 more questions, or do you want to save this?
Let's go. No, let's go.
Okay, cool. Are the cliffs a protected area today?
Yes, there are a lot. Well, tourists are all over them. You'll see a lot of warning signs when we get to that part of the show. And the rocks, I talk a lot, as some of you know, Bree and I can talk about one painting and one rock for an entire hour. The rocks are now protected. You're not allowed to bring them home. So unfortunately, I brought some rocks home before the law was put into place.
What can you tell us about Monet's son?
Well, we know mostly Jean and Michel. Jean actually married one of Alice's daughters. So she ended up, when Alice got sick and died, it was Blanche who married Jean, who took care of Monet and all the family affairs. And then what was the other question? The other son, Michel, the second son, he is the one who basically gave all the collection, the Monet collection, to the Marmottan Museum. And we'll see some works from the Marmottan Museum in Paris. So he took care of the estate.
Okay, one more for now.
Yeah.
I feel like you might actually end up planning on talking about this later, but if Monet painted by standing in the water, how did he do it in the fall and winter?
Yeah, and we'll definitely, I'm going to cover that. Okay.
That's what I figured.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. So do you want to run the poll?
Yes, let me pull up our poll. And here we go. What do you like to do at the beach? And you can pick as many as you want.
So do we have a winner?
Let's see. Walking along the shore or watching sunrise, sunset. Can you see the results?
Yes, I can. I was just letting you. So you'll see that Monet is definitely in the minority here, right? Painting and making art. We'll see some examples of people who do like to paint and make art in my family, as well as, fortunately, Claude Monet. But yeah, I think he enjoyed walking along the shore, watching the waves, and all the things that everyone else did. So I wanted to take this moment, and do you want me to close the poll, or you want to close it? So we can take a look at some of what were people doing in the 1870s and 90s when Monet was starting to work there. Oops, now we're going backwards. So now I want to go forward. Okay, so I'm going to go pretty quickly through these images from the 1870s through 90s. We don't actually have dates on them. There are collections of photographs and postcards. I did want to pause for a minute on this. This is L'Hôtel Banquet, where Monet stayed when he was working on his own. And he stayed on the second floor, third floor, and fourth floor during different stays there. And he would, this hotel faced the ocean. So it was a perfect place. He painted a great deal. You asked about whether he painted standing in the water. He painted an awful lot from these windows that we're looking at right now. And you can see again what the caloge look like on the right. You'll see these boats that are covered with little roofing. Now this hotel used to be called the Rendezvous des Artistes because all the artists would hang out there. So you get the feeling Monet was not alone, but he never is going to show you this view of Etretat. And sadly, this hotel was leveled by the Germans when they occupied France because they wanted a clear sight out to the sea. They were convinced the Allies were going to, as we did, invade from the Channel. And so, in fact, as you know, the D-Day beaches are south on the other side of the Seine River, about 102 miles from Étretat. And so that's 2 hours by car or 6 hours by bus. It's still a little hard to get around in this part of France. So here we have a view from what I'm going to call the Elephant Cliff, okay, the Porte d'Amont, the upstream portal, and you can see someone has walked all the way up. And now we're getting a view from the Falaise d'Aval, the downstream portal, and you can really see the beach and the town. Here we're getting to see a little more of the activities of people, okay, and what they're wearing. You see a lot of women have their umbrellas out, and there's a lot of changing stations. Here we have somebody who's much more interested in the cliffs, like Monet. Here, again, you get a sense of the social class. These are the people who are coming to play at the casino. The casino was a big draw. In 1852, it opened, and that's where the wealthy people from Paris spent their money, spent their time. So here's another view. Again, all the changing cabins for people who were going to go out on the beach because bathing was very, very popular and swimming had started to come into fashion. Meanwhile, there's the people who actually lived in Étretat. Étretat was originally a fishing village, and so people still did their business on the beach. It's also, there is a freshwater stream that flows down into the bay, and so women would wash all the clothing, the linens of all the visitors and the hotels there. And here you see the capstans, which are the winches that had to be used to pull the boats up because there's no harbor. And so it was a lot of work to get those boats up onto the shore. I'd like you to look carefully at this painting because then you can see it's kind of the invention of swimming as a sport. People bathed, but it was only in this time period, 1870s, 80s, 90s, that people started swimming for their health. And we also have this wonderful diving board. Okay, so you could climb off and jump off the diving board because it's a very steep, the bay is very steep there. And so it's actually safe to jump off a diving board. And here is a painting that was the talk of Paris. It did a great job bringing people to Étretat. And you can see it looks very, very much like this photo. And so the guy at the end of the diving board turns out to be Guy de Maupassant. an important French writer. We'll talk about him later. And then you can see this woman in the fancy clothes climbing up the diving board, and she was a very famous actress who was in La Dame aux Camélias. Okay, so that which became turned into things like Rent. You know, this has been a very popular story. The woman who wore camellias, very upper class courtesan in the time period. And now we're going to look at Monet's first campaign. He used a military term to talk about this long, well, for him, it was 3-week stay, and he came out with about 20 canvases, 1882 to 1883. Again, here we're lucky we have the title telling us that it's near Etretat. And as I said, this is what he wanted to do, was to paint seascapes. So here we are nearby with really just a boat on the horizon, beautiful sky and water. And I'm not going to read you from all the letters, but we know a lot about what he did in Etretat because he would write to Alice every day. And so she asked him to destroy all her letters. We don't have those, but we do have all his letters. So he wrote to her, "I count on doing a large canvas of the cliff of Etretat, although it is certainly bold of me after Courbet, who did it admirably, but I will try to do it differently." And so here are 4 of the Courbet paintings that he saw at a retrospective. He was just before he came to Etretat in February 1883. And this is the one of the critics said, it's in a private collection, so I had to scan it from a book, or my husband scanned it for me. This is the one that looks the most like Courbet. But already you can see how different it is. It is, yes, impressionistic. It's not a photograph. We wouldn't confuse it with a photograph. We see all the wisps, we see the colors, and this is one of the most amazing things I hope you notice, the way he uses the blue in the cliffs to connect the cliffs with the sky and with the water. So just the way he unifies his canvases using color is just one of the things that makes him so special. In addition to the blue, of course, we have white, the wispy clouds, we have the white of the cliffs, and as well as the foam and the froth on the waves. Again, the same theme. You can imagine what the weather was like. Okay, rough weather, and this is a theme that we'll see repeated. If you look over on the top of the cliffs, you can see the kind of orange stripe, and that's the path that you take when you're walking up to look over on the cliff. Here, he's getting the caloge and the boat in, and we see his favorite, 1 or 2 people is enough for me. Of course, there would be many tourists in the summer months, but here we are in February, there's not going to be too many tourists. And then this is the first image I'm going to show you of the Mannaporte. And so this is an early 1883, and the Met owns this one. And he wrote to Alice on February 3rd, "I went down today into a place where I had not dared to venture before, and I saw admirable things, and I immediately went back to get my canvases." And so we can see that you can read that he painted this 6 times from this very same angle. So it should look pretty familiar by the time we get to more of them. Twice during each of the 3 visits to the Normandy coast, 83, 85, and 86. And then he would go home and work on them in the studio. And that's one of the reasons it's hard to say what the date is. Are we going to talk about the date he started it, the date he completed it? But my question to you is, can you find the 2 people in the painting? And of course, it's a little unfair because you're looking at a screen image on a screen. Has anyone found the 2 people? I'll take pity and show you a close-up. It's not much better. People are finding them. There they are. I tried to blow it up as a detail on the left. You can see them standing on this. They are in big trouble because the water is coming in. And here on the right, there's a photo of me looking very happy because I have managed to climb up on the Mannaporte. And fortunately, somebody left a ladder there. So that I went there at low tide because I am not the kind of person who goes into dangerous places at high tide. And more about that later. Here we go. We're looking at the other end of the town of Etretat, the other big cliff. Okay, the one I call the Elephant Cliff. And once again, very rough weather. In a number of, you asked about, does he get wet when he's painting? Is there his feet in the, there was sand on this canvas. And there's a number of the canvases where the conservators report, yes, there's sand. This one we know he painted on the beach. And again, his favorite two people looking there. And here we have a painting, which I hope is familiar to you. And here is the letter that he wrote to Alice, or a quote from the letter he wrote to Alice on the day we know that he painted the painting. I won't stay here indefinitely. She was nagging him all the time about coming home. You know well that my time is limited and that I'm looking forward to return to you, but it is necessary for me to work. Happily, that is going well and the weather is good, so just a little more patience. So a whole nother story for me to tell you would be just what he was going through emotionally during this time period. But for the moment, we'll just focus on the painting. How do we know when it was painted? Because in the 2010s, a group of scientists from Texas State they're astronomers who traveled around and would try to verify for famous paintings when they were painted. And they would do all kinds of calculations. And in this case, they calculated that he painted this work February 5th, 1883 at 4:53 p.m. local mean time and even could determine the GPS coordinates. And they also questioned the people who say that the needle is 225 feet tall, and they say, no, it's 179. So I was just trying to say, okay, it's about 180. And I took this close up. It's not very good resolution with my iPhone, because I just wanted to show you what the setting sun looks like. So one of my favorite parts of the painting, besides the cliffs, is the sun. And here's the close up. And you can see he made it from just a swirl of orange paint. And what I love is that it reminds me so much of a painting. This is the painting that began the Impressionist revolution because of the title. So he called it Impression Sunrise. And that is where the critics said, oh, this is not a real painting, it's just an impression. And so this has gone on to be one of the most important paintings of Monet's career. It was bought by Ernest Hocheday, right, the husband of Monet's second wife. And there's little, kinds of little details. It was stolen, it was recovered. So a good story. Now I'm a little jealous of this painting, which is in France. It shows the sunset, but we don't see the sun, but I think it's absolutely beautiful as well. So I'm glad there are two paintings of Etretat at sunset in this world. And then the boats. This is when he has a terrible time because the weather gets really bad and the fishermen keep moving the boats. And so he's very frustrated because he always wants to paint them at a certain time of day, and it's very annoying to him when things move. So here again, boats from another side, and you can kind of tell he's up high. And as we know, he was actually painting out the window from his hotel. Again, more boats, beautiful use of color here, the yellows and the reds. And then here we're getting a view of he's going to be outside painting this one. He's going to be up on the cliff looking down, looking across the bay. And here, this one is just full of people, but you can get as close as you want. You can zoom in and the people are not going to be very clear. They're not likenesses. They're just, as we say, impressions. And here even more impressionistic, fuzzy, different materials. And so as you kind of collect the photos from around the world, the images around the world, you can see there's just a variety in what you can download from the internet. So now I'm going to move on to the second campaign. He comes back in '84 and stays back and forth between Giverny, and he's now installed Alice and all the children in Giverny, but he keeps coming back to make more paintings. And so this is when he's really going to make more than 50 canvases. So Bree, I'll pause for a second. Are there any more burning questions?
Yes, there are two that I can see. Someone asked in the chat a while back, did any of his children paint?
Yes, Blanche in particular. I told you she's his daughter-in-law, but he was giving her a lot of painting advice. So she's probably the most important painter in the family.
Cool. And then I think this is a reference to the other paintings you were showing earlier. Were bathing machines used during Monet's time and in that region?
I really can't answer that question. I don't really know what a bathing machine is. I kind of had this vague idea. As far as I know, the diving board was, as advanced as they got in Etretat, but I'd have to do more research to answer that.
Got it. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. Again, we see just his beautiful use of color. He's back, and this is where he's standing, probably when he painted our painting, except for there's a big rock in the way. We start to see, again, the weather gets bad, what's going to happen. And now I'm going to show you 3 of these pastels that I had never seen before I started doing research. Okay, so you can see it's just a very different, you can do this much more quickly. Private collection. And this one I really like. Again, it's a different format, different direction. Again, private collection. So we'll probably never get to see these. And the reason we have these at all was because he was the guest at the home, at the villa, okay, of this man named Jean-Baptiste Faure, who was the most famous baritone of his time period. He was also a composer and a very important art collector, and particularly of the Impressionists, and then Monet as well. Good friends with all of them. And when Alice and the children came with Claude to stay in Étretat for a few weeks, they stayed at the home of Monsieur Faure. And then later, when Alice and the kids left, he moved back to the hotel because then he could paint from his window. And I don't have, there's no longer, his villa is no longer standing, but this is another fancy villa, and it's called La Villa Orphée. And just to give you another sense of the levels, the social levels we're dealing with. So this is Jacques Offenbach, who became very famous for his performance, or his creation of, it was an opera, Orphée aux Enfers, Orpheus in the Underworld. And he made so much money that he could create this villa that we just saw. Here's his villa, Orphée. And still to this day, every summer there is a festival Offenbach in Étretat, and so it's one of the other things tourists can do. And if you've heard the can-can, we're getting ready for Bastille Day tomorrow, if you associate the can-can with France, then that's from Orpheus in the Underworld. Here he is, Monet, back in his window, painting boats. Weather looks terrible, so he's still having trouble. But then the weather gets better and he can paint the boats going out to sail, and then he's super happy. This is one of his favorite things. And so he wrote to Alice how much he loved seeing the big boats moving. Another version, okay, he wants to paint this every day, and whenever the weather permits, that's what he does. Then the weather gets terrible. These 2 wonderful paintings from the Art Institute of Chicago. They've done so much research on these paintings. I could talk about them easily for an hour, but we don't have another hour to talk about these paintings. He's so depressed, the weather is terrible, so he's painting from his window. Then finally the weather clears and all the boats are able to go out. So how many times did he start working on this painting and everything kept changing? Then we get some good weather, beautiful painting of this, of the Porte d'Aval. We don't really see the needle. And then again, we get these sketchier, and we have no way, I have no way of telling you whether this is just a terrible reproduction or whether it's one of his more quick sketches or impressions. Because here's an example, okay, of a painting that we can't really tell from here whether this is completely in focus or out of focus. He loved to make sketches, but he kept this one in particular with him for the rest of his life because it was not something that his dealer wanted to sell. It's too sketchy. They wanted finished paintings to sell. So here's a great example of what would be considered the same. It's the same view, but it's a finished painting designed for sale. And this one is now at the Art Institute. Speaking of light, again, what a beautiful day this is. He has the chance to go down to the beach. We'll get a chance to talk about that on the other side of the Porte d'Aval, and you get a good view here of how far apart the Needle and the Porte d'Aval actually are. You can see the boat sailing between them. And then Guy de Maupassant became famous for telling stories and kind of creating this myth about Monet. He was no longer a painter, but a hunter. He was followed by a swarm of children who would hand him different paintings. And this is again part of his series style, that he would take a bunch of canvases and then move from one to the other as the sky would change. So here, again, we're starting to see this beautiful, beautiful use of color, close up, again, of the needle, and he's just fascinated by these two cliffs. And then this is our painting, The Waves at the Mannaporte. As I mentioned, this one, our most recent acquisition. And in fact, he didn't want to sell it. His dealer didn't want to offer it for sale. But when the painter, John Singer Sargent, saw it, he insisted on buying it. And so this is an example of Sargent, who's a well-known American portraitist, spent a lot of time in Europe, was very close friends with Monet, and insisted on buying the painting, even though it wasn't quote unquote finished. Once he signs it, though, it's considered finished. Once it was ready for sale, he would sign it and then it would be considered done. Here we have a much more finished version of the Mannaporte. Here we are at high tide. I've talked to you a little bit that this is a very strongly tidal area. And then here's a pastel of low tide. So you can see just how different it is. Almost the same view, but at high tide and low tide. Here we've seen it from the east, from the west, through the hole. And then we're back down to the question you asked me about, did he paint in the water? Now this quote I'm going to read to you. This is from a letter, November 27th, 1885. I was hard at work beneath the cliff, well sheltered from the wind in the spot which you visited with me. This is to Alice, of course. Convinced the tide was drawing out, because in fact the hotel had forgotten to change the tide table. He was looking at yesterday's tide table. I took no notice of the waves which came and something a few feet, a little typo there, from me. In short, absorbed as I was, I didn't see a huge wave coming. It threw me against the cliff. I was tossed about in its wake along with my materials. My immediate thought was that I was done for as the water dragged me down, but in the end I managed to clamber out on all fours. But Lord, what a state I was in. My books, my thick stockings, and my coat, right? So this is November. Were soaked through. The palette, which I had kept a grip on, had been knocked over my face. My beard was covered with blue and yellow. But anyway, now the excitement is past. No harm is done. The worst of it was that I lost my painting, which was very soon broken up, along with my easel bag. Impossible to fish anything out. So completely discouraged, but alive, happy to be alive, he went back to Giverny to get more supplies so he could come back to Étretat and finish his campaign. Alice, of course, was very worried. She thought she was going to lose him. And then we see some more peaceful views of Etretat, focus on the sailboats. Loved, again, he had a passion for painting. And then this is a good example of morning effect. Effect was a word that he used to say he wasn't really planning on considering this a finished painting, but he did sign it. He did sell it. This is when he ventured even further south. And here again, he's so excited when the weather is good enough for the ships to go out. Once again, we're back at the Mannaporte. And this is just to give you an example of two different versions from the web of the painting. How does it really look? Well, we need to go to the Krieger Museum to find out. And then this is the last image of Etretat by Monet that I'll show you. Rain. Okay, so this is a very probably much more typical than he would like to admit how often it was raining. And so now I need you all to look and choose. Imagine that we could give you one of these paintings to take home. So take a look and see if you can choose one that's your favorite. And once you've had a chance to look, Bree will launch the poll and we'll see which one wins the beauty contest. Okay, we need to launch a different poll, Bree. There we go. Thank you. People have opinions. Well, I think the Clark Institute is going to have to watch out because it looks like the highest number want number 6, which is up there in Massachusetts. But I'm glad to see that every painting got a vote. I had a really hard time choosing my 6 favorites to put up there on the on this kind of review of what we've seen, covering the 1860s to the 1886 paintings of Etretat around 1890. He's going to start having made enough money to be able to purchase his property in Giverny, and then he realizes he doesn't need to travel in order to find a great place to make paintings. He can do it at home. So Bree, let's take a quick pause and see if we have any other questions to address before we move on to my vacation photos. I know everyone's been waiting for my vacation photos.
Yeah, looks like a couple questions. What way was the canvas or easel set up?
I honestly can't answer that. I haven't seen any images of him painting at Étretat, and there was really no one there to capture that because he was doing this really on his own. I mean, there's this idea from Guy de Maupassant that he had, all these little children following him, and we don't know how true that was, but it made a good story. So I'm afraid I can't answer that. I think we do have movies later of him painting in Giverny, but I have never seen anything about the earlier the Giverny years. I do know he had a studio boat. He loved to paint in his studio boat, but you couldn't take a boat out into it, and with all your painting equipment, it really wouldn't be practical. So I'm sorry, I did not answer that question very well.
Next one is, have there been notable structural changes in the cliffs of the Needle since Monet's time due to weather, erosion, etc.?
Not really. I did see in the image there used to be a tower, kind of a kind of Gothic tower that's no longer there. It's just ruins now. But the cliffs, again, my geologist husband might have something else to say, but to me they look very much like they do in these paintings, even though they're kind of soft. They're the hard part that's kind of left.
And then one more from the previous slide, asking when was number 1, of the choices painted. It looks quite different from the others.
That was the earliest. So that was from the very beginning. So the 1860s.
Cool. Yeah, and then just the question about YouTube. I can't get to my browser right now to share the direct link. But if you you can just Google NCMA YouTube and it'll be the first thing that shows up, or you can go to YouTube, type in North Carolina Museum of Art, and then find our YouTube channel and the recording. What's that?
And they should subscribe.
Yes, subscribe. Perfect.
Then you'll get
everything.
Notice when it comes out.
Yeah, all of our lectures will be posted after that. Oh, is there one more question? Oh, yeah, there is one more now that we've been talking. Since he destroyed so many canvases, did he discard the Etretat paintings too?
Yes, he destroyed a lot. He destroyed many things. And particularly when we're talking about his drawings or his pastels. Again, I think I forgot to mention he gave those pastels, the reason we still have those was because he gave them to Monsieur Faure as like a house, the I am your guest kind of gift, the opposite of a hostess gift. No, I forget. Would that be a hostess gift? I guess it would, but it was a host. And so that's how some of them remained. And a lot of the drawings, again, a lot of them were given by Michel Monet to the Musée Marmottan, which is now called the Musée Marmottan Monet. So, but again, they're not going to be on display very often, the works on paper.
Great. Any other questions right now at this moment we can address for people?
I'm going to see if I can get the next slide. Oops, I got it, because that's our next poll.
Cool. Yeah, we will move on and then we'll get to more questions later. Thanks. So you want me to pull the next poll?
Yeah, this is the final poll.
Yep, let me find it. Here we go. All right.
We're going to be talking about food. I hope everyone had dinner. I hope you finished your moule frite.
There we go. Yeah.
You're on the dessert dessert course.
All right, a few more seconds. All right.
Well, I think everyone is very wise to be eating seafood at the beach. It's definitely popular, and we got a lot of fresh fruit. I'm very impressed that everyone has fresh fruit. And yeah, I don't know what it is about ice cream, but ice cream always tastes better at the beach. I'm in total agreement. So this is a photo essay that I made from the thousands of photos that my husband and I have taken and our kids have taken of Etretat. So here is actually a placemat from one of the many restaurants we went to, where you see this is kind of adorable drawing, and you'll find Etretat at about 10 o'clock, if you imagine this being a clock. In the center, apples, because apples, that's all that's going on here, the most popular fruit. And you can see there's a painter there at the Falaise d'Etretat painting the cliffs. You can see how much bigger Le Havre is, and the very famous bridge, which wasn't there, of course, during Monet's time, that you can now travel across to get from Honfleur, which is what we see down there at the bottom of the screen, and you can get across to get to northern upper Normandy. So here's my little talk. So the cliffs of Étretat are pure enchantment. This is my place of enchantment. You arrive, of course, at sunset. And here you see the famous galets or rocks. It's not a sandy beach, it's a rocky beach. Sunset. And just an incredible light. You can understand why people would want to go paint there. Afterglow, and of course our painting. You check in to the town's most picturesque hotel, La Résidence Manoir de la Salamandre. Of course, you have reserved in advance. First time I took my family to Etretat, having fallen in love with the painting at the NCMA. On our trip to Europe, I said we have to go to Etretat, but we did not know there would not be a hotel. You couldn't just walk up and get a hotel room. You have to reserve in advance. Ever since then, I've been successful. So you can see this is just a beautiful old style building with wood and brick and very gorgeous architecture. Sculptures in wood, little sticks there to keep the pigeons off. Give a very medieval look, a green man, one of my favorites, animals. And then, of course, the famous salamander, who's associated with Francois Ier, who that was his emblem, was the salamander. And it was an animal that was believed to be able to live through fire. So I think that's what you're seeing above and beyond the salamander. And here I am peeking out our window. One time we got the big room at the top, and we were very happy about that. Food, what are you going to have to eat? Well, I will eat oysters. I will have a seafood platter, but most of the time we would have crêpes for dinner. And I hope some of you have tried some French crêpes. And in France, you have to have a second crêpe for dessert. So here are my oysters. I can afford half a dozen. Here I am. Obviously, this is not nighttime. This is daytime. You can also have them for lunch. This is what it looks like when you're done. This is, on the left, is what the French consider a seafood platter. This is not calabash style. A ton of snails, shrimp with their eyes still showing. You can choose whether to dab them in shallot and vinegar or in mayonnaise. And of course, you have butter to go along. And then we'll start in on the crêpe. Okay, so this is a crêpe that's also a salad on the right. Here is your first course crêpe, and you see, of course, your cider on the table as well as my camera. And there is a cup of cider. Usually you're going to have it in kind of a bowl, but this one has a handle. Here's your classic dinner crêpe. So eggs and ham are very common. I often would go for the goat cheese, walnuts, and ham. This is shepherdess crepe on the right. But then it's the dessert crepes that will get you. This is the most basic kind of crepe you can get. Crepe, they love their caramel sauce. In Normandy, they have so many cows, so there's a lot of great sugar and cream. But even better, ice cream and these little rosettes of crème chantilly or whipped cream. And then our favorite creperie, where we spent as much time as we possibly could, they would have different dessert crepes named after the different cliffs. So here's a close-up, if that doesn't make you hungry. And then there's always the chocolate option. And the next day, if you hadn't eaten enough at dinner the night before, you get apple pie for breakfast at the Hotel Salamandre. So those are about as many apples. You think about apple pie being American, well, I've got another thing for you. Finally, we get a chance to stroll the beaches, but as I said, Monet has been there before you. They have actual paintings or representations of the paintings, reproductions of the paintings is the word I'm looking for, facing in the right direction so you don't get confused. And here we have them facing the other direction. They tell you where you can find the actual painting. But what if you don't want to go walking? Well, you can always take sailing lessons. You can take kayaking lessons. And can you imagine learning how to kayak in a place like this? Actually, my husband and I did kayak, and it's a lot harder than you'd think because of the tides again. My family, we're a bunch of bookworms, and so I think it's absolutely fabulous. They have a free library right there on the beach. Okay, so plenty of people reading books. And it's a nice place to sit and people watch, and you don't even have to buy any drinks or anything. Now for your walk exploring the cliffs, you're going to have a choice. You remember the cliffs that we've studied. First question, is it high tide or low tide? Now, if it's high tide, you have another choice to make. You can walk north up and across the Elephant Cliff, La Falaise d'Amont, upstream portal, or you can walk south across the Arch and Needle, La Falaise d'Aval, or the downstream portal. If it's low tide, there's a third adventure, across the oyster beds and through the cave. We'll save that for later. Today, the choice is simple, the tide is high. And this is what it looks like even in the summer. Okay, very stormy and cold. We're going to go up north, up the Elephant Cliff, the Porte d'Amont. And so we're going to be taking a walk over there to see the elephant, see the church up on top. And now there's a museum up on top as well. You see the second spire, that's a museum, an aeronautical museum. This is my husband getting ready to climb up, okay, because there's a lot of stairs. And they are very careful to tell you how dangerous it is because of falling rock. Okay, so again, a kind of rainy, stormy day, but you can see up on the top, you can see little people walking along, and behind that fence, there are going to be some cows. And you can go back and get the view that we've seen of the Porte d'Aval and the Needle. And here we are climbing. You can actually walk out towards the elephant, watch him drink the water. And there's a close-up and you can see the layers. So here, even though Monet, in our painting, it looks all gray, you can really see the gray and white stripes alternating, and then how all the flowers and the moss grows on top. And then my daughter, who's along with my husband, the artist in the family, brought her sketch pad and was drawing up there. And here we have her at work. And here we have the finished work, which she very wisely gifted to us and is in our living room. Yay, Selena. Okay, now we're going to take our second walk. I think we've had lunch in between. And this way we get to see the Mannaporte. And that's our North Carolina Museum's version of the Mannaporte, which, as I said, is now in Seattle. And so as you climb up, but then again, you're going to get a more and more interesting view. You can see the town, you can see the church on the other cliff and the aeronautical museum. And they're going to warn you, right? Very, very dangerous, okay? No responsibility in the event of accident. Don't fall off, because you can see it's kind of a long drop. getting closer to the Porte d'Aval, and you can see the ruins of that little kind of fantasy castle that used to be up there. Keep getting higher and higher. The view gets further and further. You can watch the waves rolling in. You can see the elephant drinking. And then to give you an idea, again, the atmospheric conditions, there's my husband trying to take a picture, and hopefully he won't get blown away. You can see what Monet was up against with his easel, right, flapping in the wind. Again, beautiful shot of the Mannaporte, and you can see the beach called La Valleuse de Jambourg, and so there's actually one of the desserts was named after this beach that's in between the Porte d'Aval and the Mannaporte. And we're getting closer and closer. Then you get the view, the kind of reversed view from our sunset with the cliff and the needle. Once again, you see how far apart they really are. And you see this is high tide because you see there's not that much beach left. And there's my son, Max. Hi, Max. And with us. How we got this picture, I don't know. Maybe someone took it for us. I don't remember. Okay. I want to make sure before we run out of time that you get to see the third walk, which is only at low tide. And you can go through the mysterious cave onto the beach between the arch and the needle portal and the Mannaporte. And I need to do more research on this. I know the cave was there when Monet visited, but I don't believe that it was carved through. So again, I'm gonna need more research. I think it was only after his second campaign that they actually carved a tunnel from the cave onto the other beach. So it's very famous. It's called the hole. It's called literally the manhole. Okay, and I found this newspaper article about how many times they have to call out the rescue squad. And one of the reasons they built the tunnel through, you can see some windsurfers also. Again, just the beautiful, beautiful rocks on the beaches, always something to pick up and hold, but you can't take it home. Then at low tide, you can see the oyster beds from Marie Antoinette's time. Okay, she would have her oysters, and you can see some of the things built into the cliff, little former storage areas. But people would love to come catch mussels or different kind of sea creatures. And again, it's just beautiful. The gray galets against the kind of beige cliff materials. And this is what the oyster bed area looks like, covered with very, very slippery seaweed. So here we are, kind of getting closer to the cave hole, as they call it, the manhole, but that doesn't quite translate very well. And here is my husband making his way along, and you can see the different colors, the different layers of the rock. And to the left, I want you to notice the pillbox. It's that concrete bunker that's over to the left. And so there'll be signs up talking about what happened in World War II when the Germans were trying to prevent the Allies from landing in Etretat. And the bunkers are still all along the Alabaster coast. There were mines, there was all kinds of problems. And there's my two men posing in front of the cliff, getting closer and closer. It's a long walk to the cave, and just beautiful. Again, everywhere you look, there's beauty in Etretat. So here we are looking out from the cave across to the Elephant Cliff, the Porte d'Amont. And here we are walking through the cave, which, as I said, I believe was only drilled through after Monet's time there. And then you always have the question of how are you going to get out? So this year we were very lucky because somebody had already tied a rope onto, you can see the town has put these metal barriers or fences to kind of, again, to help people get down. So this time I had to do a little belaying, about as far as I want to belay, but it's absolutely worthwhile to get out on this beautiful beach. There's usually very few people who make it, and you have to study your tide table because you could easily get caught. And this gives you a sense of the size of the needle. And I don't know if anybody had a chance to read the story of Arsène Lupin, and the jewels of the king, which were, according to the story, hidden in the hollow needle. Of course, none of it's true, but it makes a good story. Again, tide is getting lower, so all the rocks and the seaweed are exposed. And here we are looking back at the needle and the Porte d'Aval, as we saw this painted by Monet a number of times. And then this is actually the path, this is the escape route now that you'll have to take if the tide comes in and you don't want to call the rescue squad, because we've seen people being helicoptered out. But you can see it's very, very steep, and this is the path that Monet took when he was, can you imagine, carrying all his equipment down to the Valeuse. Again, further back, we're at the Mannaporte now, looking back. And you can see the rocks that are kind of replaced the two people in the Met version of the Mannaporte. So they've got these rocks kind of posed there on top. Here they are in close up. And of course, who can resist taking photos of just as Monet painted the paintings, of looking through the Mannaporte back down at the needle and the Porte d'Aval. And then, as I said, one year, Douglas and I took the kayak, and we're able to have the fun of kayaking through the Mannaporte and then all the way up to the needle. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it's very easy to go swimming there. The water is freezing even in the summer, so I don't know what those people were doing in the photos that we saw. But if you want to get wet, you certainly can. And we're hoping that not too many people want to come to Étretat in 2022 when we're planning to go back, but I certainly invite you all to take a look. And now I'm just going to open it up to questions. So Bree, do we have any questions or comments or anything? I can either stop sharing the screen so we can see each other. Should I do that?
Sure, that sounds good. Whatever you prefer.
And there, if we wanted to hear the can, we could have done that.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much, Diane. This is wonderful. So yeah, a lot of the comments are just about how beautiful the photos were and how hungry you made people. Me included. I really want a crepe now. So yeah, lots of thanks for that. I think there was two questions here so far in the Q&A. What time of year were you there visiting and taking photos that you shared?
So I would go when I was doing the summer study abroad program. So I would be there every summer. So all my photos are going to be in July, really pretty much July. If we would go on the way when I would take students, that would be the beginning of June. And so, but pretty much I'm just in June and July. Monet is not there in June and July. So I saw a very different time period.
Was it still fairly chilly though? I mean, it looked like your daughter was kind of bundled up.
Yeah, no, it could be very chilly. And again, we're way up north compared to our latitude. Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, the nights are very long in the summer, but it can also be very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think that in the winter and even the fall, it was probably very cold.
I know, and you don't think that when you're looking at his picture because he uses such warm colors, such warm, beautiful colors, but he was freezing, right? He was freezing.
Yeah, I don't know how he felt his fingers. Anyway, cool. So, and then someone else asked, they will be in Bordeaux, and I don't know this place. I'm not sure. If you can look at the Q&A, you might know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that's good.
They'll be there next May. How easy would it be to get to Etretat?
Well, if you don't have, the Dordogne, right? So no, that's more in the south central area. Mm-hmm. It is not at all easy to get to Étretat if you don't have a car. If you want to see the Normandy beaches, which is absolutely fabulous, you can do that on a day trip from Paris. I would recommend, of course, spending much more time there. But it would not be, if you're going to be in Bordeaux and Dordogne, it's going to be a long haul. So you really want to make a special plan to be in the north of France, there's plenty to see there.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for pronouncing it. I cannot do Romance languages.
No, that's my job.
That is your job. You're the expert. A couple more questions. Among his series, where does Etretat rank? It seems like he painted so many of this view that it might be the winner.
It is, in fact. So out of the 2,000 so paintings, and thank you for this question. Out of the 2,000 or so paintings that we have of him, 80 of them are of Étretat, and except for Giverny, so it's the location that has the most paintings. Okay,
Great.
any other questions coming up?
Oh, Linda's wondering who, I think Linda is the one that said she's a big fan of you, I'm pretty sure, which I agree.
Thank you, Linda. Good to see you again. She's been in many of our tours, Brie.
Yes. Do you use your French a lot when you travel to France, or is English spoken in most of the spots that you visit?
So again, it's going to be an age-related question in that who are you talking to? If you're talking to anyone under the age of 30, they're likely to speak in English, and they're likely to want to practice. They think it's the sign of hospitality to speak your language. So they're going to be very happy to speak English to you. If you're talking to older people, then it's going to be much less common. I mean, I'm a French teacher, so of course I'm going to speak French, and you do get a special, you get treated well if you speak the language, and that's true in any European country. They're happy to have you. They may correct your French, they may complain about your accent, but they're very proud that you want to learn their language and speak their language.
Making the effort, yeah.
So
Janice wants, oh, do you see it? There you go.
I see, I've got it now. So unfortunately, I'm retired now from NC State. So 2016, I retired and became full-time volunteer over at the museum. And so until we start travel again, obviously I want to take all the staff who've been looking at the Etretat painting with me for the all through the pandemic and on. We've been doing a lot of talking about Etretat. I would love to take another group, but we'd have to, again, it's going to have to be organized a little differently. Any other questions? I think we still have.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes.
But we still have 5 minutes.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments, or I don't know, share your story to travel story?
I would love to hear. Is anyone allowed to unmute themselves, or we're pretty much going to have to do the chat?
If someone did want to use their voice, you would just do the raise hand function, and I could allow you to talk if you wanted to, use your voice to say or share anything. Do that.
As I'm very curious, Peter Reynolds said that was surprisingly real, and so I'd love to hear either in the chat or if you'd like to to speak. I'd love to hear what made it real for you, because of course this is something I've been dreaming of doing for my entire time at the museum. The first chance I've had to talk for a whole hour and a half just about Etretat, my favorite place in the world.
Well, I see a few. Oh, I don't know if Peter's still with us or raised hand, but I'll start with the people who raised their hand first. So Nancy, if you want to share or say anything, I can allow you to talk.
You just need to unmute, Nancy. And in the meantime, would we like to do a presentation, a tour? I don't know if Rudy means a virtual tour or a live tour of Giverny. And of course, I would love to be able to do a live tour of Giverny, but we can talk about organizing. We don't own any paintings of Giverny, but we're in the virtual world. We could do pretty much whatever we wanted. I'd love to do a presentation on Giverny as well. Virtual, good, Rudy, that one I can do.
Yes, we could do that. Okay, let me try to see if
we can get Nancy.
Tim wants to talk. I'll go to the next person. So
unmute. And Rudy also wanted to know, while we're waiting for these people to unmute, do we need to unmute them?
I have to, they have to unmute. I asked them to unmute. So let's see. Maybe they don't want to talk.
That is fine. Okay, I just wanted to answer the question about the Musée de Marmottan. It's lovely. It's a private museum. It's not huge. And it's all about, it's almost all about Monet. There's usually one exhibition upstairs about someone else. I've seen Berthe Morisot. I've seen the Orientalists. So they do have some wonderful little exhibits. But downstairs, it's worth the trip just by itself. There are going to be a lot of the water lily paintings as well as the early paintings. So I definitely recommend the visit to to the Musée Marmottan if you get to go to Paris.
Hmm. We did get some more questions in the Q&A section. If you wanted to address those, what do you like especially about his sunset picture?
Ooh, what a tough question. You think I'd be prepared to answer that? I think it just gives me a sense of calm and beauty, and it's everything, something about when the sea hits the land, when you get to see an ocean and you get to see mountains or cliffs. Those are my favorite places in the entire world. And so I go to the California coast, I go to the coast of Maine. We don't have too many mountains in North Carolina right next to the sea, but you can go to the mountains and the sea. So we do the best we can in North Carolina. But if you can get me a mountain going into the sea, I'm a pretty happy woman. The Mediterranean also, the Alps that go down. I mean, please, I could keep going. The best time of year to visit Giverny, I would take again my students there on the way to Lille. So it's going to leave after Memorial Day, and we get there at the beginning of June. And so to me, that's really the best time. But anytime you go to Giverny, I would say spring, summer, or fall, you're going to see a lot of blooming flowers. If you want to see the water lilies, well, then you're going to want to go spring or summer. Yes, and
it does look like, oh, Peter answered about why he felt it was real. Do you see that in the chat?
I will now. Oh, thank you so much, Peter. That was very, very, very sweet comments. This was a pretty unusual program to put together. It kind of started at the beginning of the pandemic when I started collecting the photos, and we never ended up showing them as part of a NCMA program. And I don't know how it came. Bree pulled it out of the hat and said, "Would you like an hour and a half on Etretat?" And I said, "You got it." Yeah. So I got to pull it together, all the things I really, really love, and doing the research was fabulous for me. Again, I didn't get to answer all the questions I wanted to answer for myself, but I had an excuse. My husband will tell you I've been working for the past couple months really on this presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like this could be a part one of many. So we'll have to figure that out. And I don't know too, Linda and I were chatting near the end. You probably didn't see it, but talking about how fun it would be to do something like this, the presentation in person and have the treats and the drinks and the crepes.
Yes,
for everybody who comes. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yes, when we reopen for real. I mean, the museum is open, but we're not.
Yes, well, we can have food
dining, and we're not doing group tours. But it's a dream. Yeah. And you've got Bree's email. You want to see Giverny. You want to see more on Monet. I covered really just one part of his life because it was the painting that changed my life. Literally seeing it at the museum and devoting myself to going to France. And some people are talking about, a recommendation to go to Giverny. Yeah, you kind of want to spend the whole day there. Morning and afternoon are going to be very different. You get to visit his house, his beautiful house. Again, I'm going to have fun doing this tour. I can just see. It may be it may be 2020, again 2022 before we do it, but
it'll happen. Everything in time, right?
And yes, we could have crepe together. I think we can work this out, right? I'll get Brianna. We can have them out in the park. I don't, who knows?
Yeah. There's probably a crepe truck somewhere, I'm sure.
I'm sure if there isn't, we can make one. We can invent one. If there's food trucks doing everything. Thank you, Linda. I am delighted to present. Been doing a lot of presentations to senior groups, and I have a French group, the Alliance Française, I present to every month in French, and I can do any of their tours that I've done for them in English. I'm waiting for someone to ask. So thank you, Linda. It could happen.
I see two more questions. So if you have a few more minutes, obviously log off if you need to, but I'm gonna, since we are good on time, Linda does want to know if you visited any of the locations mentioned in Madame Bovary.
Well, did you know that I taught Madame Bovary semester after semester? And so, of course, we've gone on I could do a Madame Bovary presentation on Flaubert. And yes, we visited in Rouen, where he grew up, the famous parrot. I mean, yeah, I could go on. And I love Emma Bovary. I mean, I love anyway. Oh my gosh, Holy Carp Food Truck. We actually have a recommendation, Bree. I hope you're keeping.
Oh, I was scrolling up in the chat to make sure. Oh, perfect. I will write that down. Thank you, Kim. And just so y'all know, I did put my email again in the chat if you do want to email me any follow-ups or if you have questions.
We'll forward them.
I can always forward them to Diane as well.
And so Sarah has an excellent question in the Q&A, how to view Monet's paintings in person. I have to say, this is one of the sad truths, is that I love virtual presentations because we can reach people, but you are not seeing the real painting. There's no photographic reproduction that's going to do justice to these paintings. So you do need to try to go see them in person. One of the things I always do with this painting in particular with students, because mostly we tour school groups, is they have to stand at the entrance to the gallery and look at the painting and then get closer and closer and closer. And just how the painting changes, I agree with you. You need to look once up close, and you can, sometimes you're allowed to use a magnifying glass. It depends on the exhibition, but you want to look up to see the brush strokes. And then you want to look back to see the effect he wanted you to have, where your brain is doing all the mixing of colors and kind of the objects appear. And so for me, he's just the perfect blend of realism and impressionism. He doesn't paint totally abstract paintings. He loves nature. He paints mostly nature, but you can you can admire the beauty of his artwork in both senses, close up and far away. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're in Gaithersburg, Maryland, Kim. Okay, well, this will be a long-term organization, but we can pull it off. I want to thank everyone for their patience. We are now over time, and I covered a lot of ground. I appreciate everybody's patience and enthusiasm. And Bree, thanks for everything. And
there are 2 more questions if you want to get to them.
Oh, of course, I love answering questions.
They just kept coming in, and
I'm a teacher. What can I say? Oh my gosh. Do you have recommendations for French language lessons for non-traditional students? Yes, walk, don't run. No, run, don't walk. To the Alliance Française. We have a great Alliance Française here, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. Lessons for all ages, and older students. Again, tutors. I in between the times I was teaching at university and while I was still teaching at university, I love one-on-one. Okay, so if you can afford it and you want to get to know a French student, I don't know what the travel restrictions are on right now we have a French business school on the NC State campus. We have French graduate students. I mean, to me, that's one of the great ways to learn is to hire someone to do it. And then again, I also recommend the Alliance Française with really highly qualified teachers at all levels. And I can be happy to follow up, Ava, in more detail. Bree will be happy to forward your questions to me. Perhaps they are simply the crêpe. Okay, Karen makes a very good point. Okay, so we could talk for another half an hour. Brittany and Normandy. So yes, the food and the crêpe are very Breton. And I have a whole presentation I can do on Brittany, okay, that I've done in French and I can translate into English. But yeah, no, there's a big difference between Breton crepes and Parisian crepes. And we could just have to have the gastronomy tour.
Yes,
talk about that
with samples.
They're different, but they're very, very good. What can I say? And there's a lot of interchanges. Most of the crêperies in Paris are going to be run by people from Brittany. So there's kind of an overlap between those two things. But there is, of course, a crêpe parisienne. They're going to use the jambon de Paris. So they're going to use the ingredients that you would find in Paris. The French are fabulous about eating locally. They, a country that eats locally.
Wonderful. Well, we'll leave it at that. I hope y'all can go get some delicious food after this or soon.
Merci beaucoup et au revoir.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Bonsoir.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Bree. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.